about the exciting part of today's session, going to college. We just wrapped up an incredible keynote address from Kiana Hatcher, who talked a lot about what it means to have a bridge to go to college. This panel will focus on exploring 5 key elements when selecting the perfect fit college. Let's introduce the panelists. I'm gonna actually start with myself as your facilitator, and then to make it easier, I'm gonna call on you all to tell us who you are in 30 seconds or less and what brings you here today. My name is Sarah Sandu. I'm a proud West Contra Costa Unified graduate, now a West Contra Costa Unified parent. And I have to say, I've spent probably the last 15 years in the higher education and K-12 space, fighting for our young people to have more access to opportunity. It's something I hold very close and dear to my core, and I'm really excited to have this conversation with you all today. And I will be your facilitator. Brittany, would you mind starting us off, please?
My name is Brittany Gaucher. I am Janae's older cousin. I attended Spelman College for undergrad and University of Southern California for graduate school, and just here to share information about going away to college and just making the best decision. And I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Brittany. And for context, Janae is one of our incredible education fair organizers. So thank you to Janae for bringing Brittany to our world. Crystal, if you don't mind, can I come to you next?
Yes, I am also was invited here by the lovely Janae, and I went to San Jose State for undergrad and currently work at a local tech company. And so I'm here to provide insight on why I chose San Jose State and offer help wherever I can.
Thank you, Crystal. Nice to have you. Gerardo, may we come over to you next?
Yeah, I was invited here by Janae. I went to UC Irvine as a mechanical engineer. Me and Janae went to high school and middle school together. And I'm currently here just trying to give people more information.
Thank you so much. We're excited to have you. Jessica, may I come over to you?
Hi, everyone. My name is Jessica Sanchez, a college access program named TRIO. And so a little bit about myself. I went to UC Santa Cruz for undergrad, was kind of debating grad school or going straight into the workforce. So I went into education because I found a passion for it, teacher for a bit, and then kind of discovered the field of college access. And so right now I'm a college advisor. I'm working for TRIO. And so things that we do on a consistent basis is help students kind of figure out what they want to do after high school and kind of gathering those resources for them. So I hope to share some of the pieces of, knowledge and wisdom that I've, learned over the years with students and families today.
Thank you so much, Jessica. And I believe Tiffany is your colleague. I'm going to go over to her next, if I can.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Tiffany Dobson. And yes, I am a colleague of Jessica's. And we're actually also colleagues of the keynote speaker. We were invited kind of like as a group. I am a pre-college advisor for the TRIO program, TRIO Talent Search program at UC Berkeley. However, I am a UC Davis alum. I am here, this is one of my favorite topics, talking about college fit and just college access in general. So I'm really, really happy to be here.
Thank you, Tiffany. And last but certainly not least, Nicole.
I'm Nicole. I was invited by Janae. We also went to high school and middle school together. I went to San Francisco State University, graduated with 2 degrees in Black Studies and Sociology. I currently work at a nonprofit as well as just started my own nonprofit consulting agency.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And yeah, I'm just here to share whatever knowledge and experiences I have and give some help.
All right. Thank you all so much. We are going to take advantage of your willingness to share everything you've learned. Let's start with just some of your personal stories in choosing the college that you chose and learnings you have. Crystal, if you don't mind, I want to come to you first. Remind us where you went to college and why you chose the college that you did.
I went to San Jose State and I started there 2013 and I graduated in 2018. So wasn't there for 4 years. I was there for a little bit longer. And my story of going to school, I actually wasn't planning on going to school. I come from a family of immigrants from Mexico who not many of us, no one has gone to, has pursued higher education. So I didn't have any plans to go to school. I didn't think there would be a value in it. And then I had some people that came into my life along the way who were really pushing me to go and just try it out. And one of those people was my dad, who was like, we really want you to try this. And so you can have a job where you can really use your brilliant mind to do something good. And so I was like, okay, I'll go give it a try. And I went to San Jose State. I had no idea what I was doing. As a first generation student, it's always really hard to find your path and find your people. But San Jose State was the perfect choice for me because financially it made sense for my family. It was close to my family, and it had the community of Latinx students that I could really connect with. And ultimately, it helped me get the job that I have today that I'm really proud of. So that's a little bit of context on how I chose San Jose State and where it's led me now. I mean, I got to meet Janae there, which was amazing, and a lot of other wonderful friends that I've made at San Jose State.
Crystal, thank you for sharing. I saw a lot of heads nodding as you were talking about your experience with choosing your college. Brittany, if you don't mind, I want to go over to you. I believe you were I saw Spelman under your name. Tell us a little bit about how you ended up.
Yes, thank you. So I actually knew that I wanted to get out of California to experience something different. Funny story, my parents were divorced and my dad lived on the East Coast. I live with my mom in California. So I knew I wanted to go somewhere in the middle to be just far enough from both parents. So I looked at schools in the South. I didn't really know about HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities, but someone in high school told me to look into Spelman. So I applied and got in and went to visit the campus. And even though it was far away and the climate in Atlanta is so different than California, I just fell in love with the campus. I fell in love with the freedom, or the idea that I was really able to be an adult and make decisions and not have my parents able to pop up on me, honestly. And it was a hard decision to go so far away from home, but it was really great to get that experience, to get away.
Thank you so much for sharing. And I'm going to come back to you when we talk a little bit about the move from, sunny California to where you went when you were in at Spelman. Jessica, if you don't mind, can you talk to us a little bit about your college choice?
Yeah, so very similar to Crystal. I also come from a family of immigrants. No one in my family has actually pursued college. So I was the first one in my immediate family and my larger family to actually have the opportunity to do so. And for me, it honestly really started through the college access program that I was a part of when I was in 6th grade. So my mom, fortunately, she worked at a middle school and was always kind of like around teachers and other folks that would talk about college. And for her, that was kind of like a new concept, a new thing. She didn't really know much about it. And so she knew, like, if I, put my kid in this program, they will be able to give her what she needs that I wasn't able to provide. And so being in TRIO, specifically Talent Search, kind of gave me that exposure. I was kind of having conversations about going to college. At the time, I obviously didn't really know what that meant or what that would look like for me. But as I kind of like stuck along with the program, I started doing a lot of great things. So I was having conversations about going to college. What is college? What are the different types of colleges out there? Started going to college tours. And then after my time with Talent Search, I transitioned over to Upward Bound. And so that's kind of like where everything really got a little more serious for me. So I started talking about, like, what do I need to be a competitive applicant? What do I need? What resources should I be taking advantage of? And so I would say I was very fortunate to have like a head start in terms of like the conversations that most students in my community weren't really having because of the lack of resources and things of that sort. And just kind of having a parent who was very like consistently checking like what I was doing, even though she didn't understand, was very important for me to kind of stay grounded in my program, because there were so many countless times that as a teenager, like I just didn't see the purpose in being in, like, spending my Saturdays going to, Saturday college and like talking about school when I was already doing this Monday through Friday. But now as like as an adult now, it's like I'm on that other side. Now I am the person that's providing those services. It's very meaningful, and it actually does, make a huge impact, especially for students who have that passion and like have that drive. They want to do that, but they just don't know how to get there. Kind of having someone that, they can identify with, someone that they can kind of look up to is very, very important and significant. So it was because of that program that kind of helped me figure out like, oh, maybe you should apply here, maybe you should apply here. You're eligible for UC, CSU, just give it a try. We have fee waivers, you don't have to pay for them. So that was a huge privilege because my parents could not pay. I think at the time it was like $50 for like CSUs and like 70 for UCs. There was no way my parents could pay for that. So I took advantage of that, applied, ended up getting into some pretty good schools. And then even at that, I still felt extremely hesitant because my mom, even though she wanted me to like go to college and was always saying, just do it, this is a great thing for you. At the same time, she kind of didn't want me to go too far. So it was like, she would say it, but she wasn't very straightforward because she didn't want to kind of like discourage me from like pursuing something that I wanted to do. So I chose UC Santa Cruz because I'm from Oakland. So I was born and raised in Oakland. Santa Cruz for us is like far enough, but like close enough to come back. So it's like an hour-ish. And I checked out the campus and it kind of just fit my personality and the way that the campus looked, the city and all of those things. And while I do think that I should have considered other things before making that decision, I think everything happened for a reason. So I really enjoyed my time at Santa Cruz. And I just also happened to know, I had a really good relationship with one of my upper bound teachers, and his mom happened to be a professor there. So it just kind of worked out. And so my experience was a little unique, but I would definitely say that for families that are, not sure how they can help their students or their children, to really rely on college access programs, because they can, we put those things for families so that they don't have to do it. And so that's kind of what really helped me. And so that's kind of why I do what I do, because I want to help other families kind of have a similar path too.
Thank you so much for sharing. And you're here on a Saturday, just like you talked about the Saturday classes before. Nicole, I'm going to come to you. Why did you choose the college that you did?
So yeah, my road to college was a little bit windy. So I actually first started off at a junior college. I was at Modesto Junior College for roughly 4 years. 2 of those years spent my first years just not doing that well academically. Still trying to find myself. And then I just started taking my academics very seriously. And when I finally got ready to transfer, I applied to San Francisco State as well as UC Santa Cruz. I got into both. And UC Santa Cruz was my like #1 school. That's where I wanted to go. I wanted to study women's studies as well with sociology underneath Angela Davis. But I had a really great mentor and professor at my junior college that told me to look into the history of San Francisco State and their ethnic studies program. And as I did my research, also being from Oakland, understanding like my lineage and where I'm from, I kind of realized that that's where I needed to be. I needed to be back in my community. I needed to kind of like continue sort of the legacy that like my family had helped create. And so that's why I decided to go to San Francisco State. And yeah, I don't regret it at all. I know it's not as prestigious as, UC, as any other UC, but I think that the history and the knowledge that lives there is something that you can't get anywhere else. So yeah.
Nicole, thank you for sharing. Actually, our next question has a lot to do with balancing reputation versus quality of programming and instruction. So I might come back to you for that one to talk a little bit more about that. But I want to head over to Gerardo. Could you talk to us about, remind us where you went and your story as far as how you got there or why you chose that school?
Yeah, so similar to Crystal and Jessica, I'm also a first generation college student, the first in the family to go to college. It basically started off by my parents really pushing me to do well academically. And I got lucky that a UC Merced advisor would come to our high school and basically just talk to the students. She reached out to me and was like, "Hey, are you planning to going to college?" And I said, "Yeah," but I really didn't have a path of how I was going to go. I just knew it was like, okay, I'm going to college. I just don't know how. So she really helped me with that. And she helped me also pick my major because I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was just like, I like math and I like robots. And just like, okay, go be an engineer. And I was like, that sounds good. And for picking the college, I applied to a couple UCs and a couple CSUs. And out of those, I basically chose the one that was the furthest away from my family because I wanted a little bit of that independence. And so that's how I picked Irvine. Once I was in Irvine, I started taking a couple of introductory classes in engineering. I really liked the subject. And so I kept with it. The first 2 years were pretty rough, mostly because with that independence, I also slacked off academically. But after that, I joined a Hispanic engineering club, a professional one that really helped me steer myself over and into the right direction and really helped me with school and playing for after school.
Thank you so much. Before we move on to Tiffany, I want to hear from you. And I saw Esteban is joining us. Thank you so much for being here. Can I just get a show of hands when you applied to college? Who didn't know what they wanted to do? Raise your hand. I see Tiffany's got the like, maybe we got it. Okay, I appreciate the honesty, and we'll come back to what to do when you have no idea about what you want to study. So thank you for that. Tiffany, would you like to tell us more about where you went to school and why you chose the college that you did?
Yeah, of course. I went to UC Davis, and I ended up at UC Davis just kind of happenstancely. I had a really rough 9th grade year in high school. So I pretty much assumed that, well, let me back up. I had a really rough 9th grade year. I didn't know much about like UC, CSU eligibility and stuff, but I just knew that, UCs, the big name, big UC, 9th grade year did not go well for me. So I pretty much stuck to just looking at state schools. And then my AP government teacher, my gov econ teacher, Mr. Peacock, he was like, why don't you apply to a UC? And I was just like, well, because I'm not going to I don't have the GPA for it. Like a little bit that I did know about eligibility at that point. I was like, I don't have the GPA for it. It's okay. I'm just going to stick with going to Long Beach State. Everything's going to be okay. Well, he was like, hey, I'll give you extra credit if you apply to a UC. So I was like, okay, well, I'll apply to this one. And that was Davis because I knew that it was close to home. Everyone knows Berkeley. So I was like, there's no way I'm gonna get into Berkeley. So I was like, let me just go ahead and apply to UC Davis. In that same breath, I had kind of like a school counselor, just like a general counselor, take all of us to an HBCU fair. And I ended up applying to Grambling, and my dad went to Grambling. So I was like, oh, cool. Yeah, I'll go ahead and I'll apply to Grambling. Got into Grambling and was really, really set on going. And then I was like, wait, it's in Louisiana. I have never left California. I'm not going to Louisiana. So then I decided to go to UC Davis. Definitely don't regret it. Loved my experience at UC Davis. However, knowing what I know now, because of the work that I do, definitely would have considered a multitude of different things before making that decision. But
thank you for sharing that. All right. Thank you all for sharing a little bit more about your journeys. Nicole, I'm coming back to you. So this next question is about how should students balance the major or the academic area that best speaks to them or their interests at the time, like with the overall reputation of the university? You started to touch on that when you were talking about why you chose SF State ultimately. So I'd love to hear a little more, like, what are things that kind of pushed you one way over the other?
So by the time I was getting ready to transfer, I had an idea of like where I wanted to go. I had an idea of like what I wanted my life to look like. I knew I wanted to be more involved in like community work. I knew I wanted to get into the nonprofit realm. I also knew like my skill sets a lot better. So I just knew myself a little bit more. And so one of the things that I did was, and I currently do this because I'm also getting ready to go to law school. So like looking at a school and looking at like the specific, like let's say a student wants to get into like sociology or engineering, looking into that program, looking into the professors that are teaching in that program, also the history of that program. What pushed me to San Francisco State was the history of ethnic studies. I knew I wanted to add to my degree when I got there. To whatever school I went to, I knew I wanted to add to my degree. So I looked at both the ethnic studies program, specifically the Black studies program, and then the women's studies program at UC Santa Cruz. And the history for me, and because of who I am and my value sets, it just aligned. So to me, it didn't matter that UC Santa Cruz was more prestigious because I knew that the things that I would learn at San Francisco State would actually align with what I was trying to do in my life. I knew I wanted to be more connected to the community, and that was the best place for me to go. If I would have gone to UC Santa Cruz, I probably would have gotten more into the academic research realm, which I still got that experience a lot more than I thought I would have gotten at San Francisco State. I got that experience anyways, on top of what I really wanted to like propel me into like organizing, community involvement, and put me in front of a lot of prestigious folks that I would not have thought that I would have been able to connect with at a state college. So,
and just to follow up on that, when you were talking about looking into the history of the programs, the instructors, the research, you found all that just on the school's website, or did you talk to a counselor? How did you go about researching?
So it was definitely beyond just the school website. I started off at the school website. After the website, I would, look into specific professors. I would probably look into, which at that time I looked into the dean of the program, or the chair of the program, and researched like her what did she publish? Mm-hmm. What had she written? What type of research was she producing? What type of research was being produced out of that program? Ended up finding out that one of the professors at San Francisco State at the Black Studies program set the research method standard that wasn't just being used in ethnic studies, but had crossed over into other realms of the academic world that, you wouldn't expect somebody from a Black Studies program to have that type of access, for research.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. The second part to this question, and I believe I saw a similar question pop up in the chat. What if a student has no idea what they want to do? And I want to go to somebody who was brave enough to raise their hand last time. Somebody want to come off mute and tell me, what if a student has absolutely no idea what they want to do? How do you go about and you were one of those students, how did you figure it out? I saw Crystal or Gerardo, Jessica, Tiffany, were you one also who?
Yeah, I can go ahead and speak to that.
Yes, please.
Well, from the professional side, if you have no idea, or if your student has no idea what they want to do in terms of like majoring or even like a career choice, go in undeclared. And don't be afraid to go in undeclared, like applying to school and as an undeclared student, because that At that point, the college and like the catalog where they have all of like the classes and the majors, it's like a giant buffet at that point. You can try just a little bit of everything. And then, you can find your footing. So then in that same like regard, there are other things to consider. You don't want to just pick a school and go undeclared, but I'm sure we'll talk about that later. On a personal side, when I went into college, I wanted to be a journalist, which is one of those things that I should have considered before deciding to go to UC Davis, because they did not have a journalism major. I think they still don't. But so I went in as an English major, quickly realized for a variety of different reasons that was not going to work out for me. My professor looked like Mr. Bean, so it was really hard to focus. And just no one seemed excited about being an English major. So I officially changed my major about 5 times before I hit sociology. In my head, I probably changed my major about 7 or 8. So if you get into college when you get into college and you go in under a certain major and you decide this isn't for me, you don't have to stick with it. Don't feel like you have to stick with it. Bounce around. Be smart about bouncing around, because depending on what major you decide to pursue, that may mean more classes, which means more time, which, at the end of the day means more money being spent in college. But definitely bounce around. I went from English to English and communications to psychology to human development to African American studies to women and gender studies. I bounced around quite a bit until I found my niche in sociology. So 2 things. Don't be afraid to go in undeclared. And then once you get to college, don't be afraid to change your mind.
Thank you so much for normalizing that. I think a lot of people need to hear that. I probably changed my major, I'm going to use your phrase, in my head maybe 10 times. So I appreciate you naming that. I'm going to move us on to this next question. And Brittany, I'm coming to you. What elements of location should be considered when selecting a college, like thinking about your move from where you were and then when you got to Spelman?
Yeah, I think it's definitely important to think about your support system. Granted, I wanted to move far away from my parents, but I was still where they could get there in a day if they needed to, if there was an emergency, or where I had family members who can drive to me and get to me that same day. So your support system is a huge one. I think making sure the community or wherever you are has resources that make you feel at home. I'm from California. I went to school in Georgia. All the California kids could never find a good taco spot. And it's such a small thing, but it's so important in the grand scope of things if you're trying to feel comfortable and just like sit back and, get some support that you would have from home and you can't even find a solid taco spot. So definitely making sure there are resources there. Like if you get your hair done, if you have locks, you need to make sure there's somebody who can do natural hair there. Like make sure wherever you go, there are resources. And other just small things that you don't think about. I'm from California, so I'm used to being able to see water. I went to Georgia, which there is a coastline, there's Savannah, but in Atlanta, it's landlocked. So there's no natural bodies of water, and there's a lake that's an hour away from Spelman, but I never made it out there. So that was kind of hard when, for mental health reasons, like I dealt with depression in college, and if at home, I could just go and take a walk and see the water or see the mountains and kind of reset. But in Georgia, I couldn't do that. So I had to find other ways to kind of get into nature and get those needs met. But those are really important location things that I didn't think about when choosing the college, but they're really important to even look at. They might seem silly, like, oh, who would think about tacos when going to school? But those are comforts that you would need that are really important to keep at the forefront when you're deciding.
Were you able to visit Spelman before you made the decision or not?
I visited Spelman one time, and we didn't travel outside. It was like just going to see the campus. And honestly, my dad fell in love with the campus, and it's an all-girls school and an HBCU. So everybody was just really excited about it. And the campus was beautiful, but we didn't take the time to drive around and see what the community was like, or we didn't check out taco spots. We didn't see how close Savannah was. We looked more so at the campus, but we didn't check out the surrounding areas.
Would you recommend that if a student is, especially if a student is considering going out of state, should they visit before committing?
I would definitely say to visit before you commit, and spend a weekend there. Check out to see what the people are like outside of the campus, because even though you'll be taking classes and spend a lot of your time on campus, you're going to have to go to the mall. You're going to have to go, out to do other things, go to the movies, go to sporting events, or whatever you like to do. Like, you're going to be living your life there for at least 4 years. So it's really important to go out, take time to at least spend a weekend to check it out and see if it fits with you, not just the academics, not just the campus, but the surrounding area as well.
Thank you so much. Gerardo, when you went to Irvine, did you live on campus?
Yeah, for the first year I lived on campus.
So answering this question, how important is it, or what role does like a campus community or like the surrounding city environment play when you're thinking about where to go to school?
So for Irvine specifically, the campus was its own bubble outside of the Irvine city. Irvine city is a very suburban, affluent city. So, I mean, coming from a small town, it kind of feels, you feel out of place, especially since the demographic doesn't tend to be very diverse. But the campus itself is very diverse. As far as I remember, I had one of the largest Hispanic percentage in the UC system. Living on campus and around campus felt like its own little city community area. My first year, I actually was part of a first generation dorm, and that really helped develop basically community within that group, mostly because we were all going through the same thing at the same time. So that was very important. And then finding a club that I could relate to and could really help me in my academics really also helped.
It's actually a great segue to this next question about what support systems and programs should students be thinking about or should be explored when making a college choice. Crystal, I'm going to come to you for this.
What support programs? I honestly wasn't really thinking about a lot of those things. The first 2 years I was there, I was going through a lot of life challenges at the time. So I didn't have the luxury to think about those things. But when I did go into my third year, I started to connect more and more with the students that were in the program that I was in, which, by the way, I studied Spanish and translation and international relations. So I had a mix of Latinx students that I was constantly around, and then perhaps not as diversified group of students with the international relations that I could mix and mingle with. And they were the ones who introduced me to programs that ended up being my support network. So one of them being Braven, which is where I met Janae, that is designed for first generation students. And they train students on how to interview, how to provide like work examples to potential employers, how to build your online brand as you're graduating. And that was one of the main support networks where I met probably like most of my friends and throughout college, because all of us had a very similar experience and we all didn't know what we were doing. We were just like, okay, we're kind of figuring things out as we go. And we know that we need to get a job after we graduate. So we kind of bonded on that. So I would say like seeking them out through asking people questions, asking my professors a lot of questions on how I can set myself up for success when I graduate. And yeah, just being curious. Like I used to be really nervous about asking questions when I was a freshman and a sophomore. But then at one point I met someone who was like, no question is dumb. Like just ask all the questions. And so that's when I really started opening up to the students in my cohorts and then ultimately the people that I met afterwards.
Ask all the questions. I love that. And I too was super nervous to approach professors. I think about it now and I'm like, God, why didn't I just ask? Or why didn't I go to office hours? Or why didn't I do these things? Hindsight's 2020, as they say. Jessica, I want to come to you with the same question, especially because you are part of a program. But what are some support systems or programs that students should look for when they're making a college choice?
Yeah. So when I was in high school, I was obviously a part of a college access program. So I think that just already had served some kind of like leverage for me. I was already kind of ahead. I knew a little bit more than my peers. And so I remember my college advisor would always like share scholarship opportunities with us. So when I was kind of deciding like my junior year what scholarships I wanted to apply for my senior year, at the time, now it's called Oakland Promise, but at the time it was East Bay College Fund before they decided to merge. And so I applied for the scholarship. It was a $16,000 scholarship, $4,000 each year. On top of that, you received like a mentor, access to like leadership opportunities. There was like a little cohort of alumni that were a part of the scholarship program at each campus that kind of like hosted like what was called crews, and they kind of like would host like, students who were just recent recipients, and kind of like it was like a peer-to-peer mentor like model essentially. So that was kind of like my first thing that I gravitated towards. So when I got to Santa Cruz, I've always been a pretty social person, so I didn't really have a hard time with like interacting with people. And so I was kind of making friends in my dorm building and stuff like that. And then I started branching over to like, where can I get a little more support academically, but also like that socio-emotional support. And so I was relying on my scholarship program to kind of provide that for me. So it was my peers, but it was also like the people who were kind of on like a little higher up that I just felt comfortable like reaching out to and asking for help if I needed it. But I think what served me the most support was my family. Like if I just did not feel comfortable, I would just come home. So I think that was a privilege for me to just kind of like leave and just catch a bus and come back. But also like I had one of my friends who had an older sister who had gone to Cal and like had already kind of been through this, situation as being first gen and stuff like that. She really encouraged me to like go to EOP. So EOP was, it stands for Educational Opportunity Program. So it is kind of like a center at your college campus for the most part. Every college campus, I know CSUs and UCs are really big on EOP. So I started relying on EOP to kind of be like my support system. So like I received academic support, like tutoring. I had drop in like, office hours on top of like my professors and what they were offering. So for me, that was kind of like, I really needed that in order for me to do well in my classes, but to not continuously fall into that like imposter syndrome, like, oh, I don't, know if I belong here, et cetera, et cetera. So EOP definitely is something that I always recommend to students who are like, but what if I get into college and I don't know what to do and I'm like stuck and I need help? Try to find like your community, right? You need your academic support, but you also are growing and developing, and you are trying to figure out who you are, and you're trying to, tap into different interests. And so identifying like a social club or a social group, whatever seems to be interesting, give it a try, but also identify where can you get support academically. And so that's a pretty, it's a pretty big program. A lot of schools for the most part should offer it. And if students don't know if the school that they want to go to has it, they should do the research to find the resources so that they know like, what do I do in case I'm stuck, or what do I do in case I need help? So that was kind of my experience. It was never linear. I will say that there was times where like I would join and I would be there, but then I was so checked out because of things that were just happening in my life. And I think it's pretty normal. It sounds kind of weird to say, like you might be in situations where, you know, you might feel like you're going like this, and then there's other, you know, moments where you feel like you're just progressing and you're doing really well. But for me, it was a matter of just kind of staying consistent. So like, if I didn't do really well as a quarter before, like, what did I learn from that quarter? Like, what do I know now? Like, I know my midterms are like 3 weeks into the quarter, I should be getting it together by the second week or something like that. So it was just a matter of like self-discipline and like, this was just a personal thing that I would do, but I would rely for more support through my family for like the emotional, you know, challenges that I was dealing with. And I really wouldn't share like the academic challenges because my family didn't understand. So I would tell them like, oh, I'm struggling with my statistics class. And my mom would just tell me, well, you know, in Spanish, she would say like, échale ganas, and I'm, you know, just keep going. And I'm like, but you don't understand, like, you know, it's not so easy. So kind of just deciding like, who are your support systems and what do they serve you for? Like, what's their purpose, is something that kind of helped me kind of figure out like, well, I know I shouldn't vent to this person because it can't really help me. So this is a person that I go to for this. And so that's kind of how I did that. And I also wanted to add something to the previous question, because this was something that I completely, like, I loved my time at UC Santa Cruz, but, and I also majored in sociology. When I came into the school, I had someone, you know, tell me, oh, great sociology program, you know, you should do this, do that. And I was one of those students that never changed my major. I kind of just stuck with it. I tapped into different areas of it, but I really wish I had considered how expensive Santa Cruz was to live in. I like did not realize that it was so expensive. Like, it was ridiculous. Like, I was sharing a room with, you know, another person, and I was still paying like $700, not even including like utilities and gas and transportation and stuff like that. So had I known that the city of Santa Cruz is one of the most expensive cities in the nation, like, I probably would have gone to SF State or even like, you know, Sacramento State or something like that, something that could offer like the same quality of education. Just the only difference was that, you know, the cost of living was a little different. SF State is so expensive, but I would have probably lived at home and just commuted, and that would have saved me a lot of money. But knowing what I know now, I think it's a matter of like, well, what do you want to invest in? Do you want to invest in the experience? Like, and that's something that I did, and I don't regret it. I'm very thankful and happy that I was able to do, to live in Santa Cruz and have that experience. But, you know, as an adult, you kind of like think about, oh, I didn't make the best financial decisions when I was this age. So now I know a little better to kind of share that with my students, to just, you know, be mindful. And if that's something that you want to do, then go for it. But also just know that it is going to cost a little more, and, you know, just keep that in the back of your mind, you know, as when you have to pay back your loans and things like that. So
It's actually a perfect segue. We know college is expensive. Tiffany, I want to ask you, thinking beyond cost. Cost is definitely, if I remember some of the research I've read, it is probably the most, it's the biggest factor that influences where a student ends up going, just based on research. But what are some of the other factors that should be considered beyond cost when selecting a college?
I told you this is like my favorite topic. Okay, so yes, cost is like a huge one. But beyond cost, my top things, like what I tell my students, these are things that I did not do when I was in high school. What I tell my students to do, of course, consider the major. As long as you know what you want to major in, or you have a general idea of what you want to major in. I wanted to be a journalist. Why did I choose a university that does not have a journalism program? First mistake. Not mistake, but just first hindsight's 2020 in that regard. Outside of major, think about the kind of experience that you want to have. I always tell my students that going to college, like if you graduate from college and all you have is a degree, you did it wrong. This is your chance to, quote unquote, try on adulthood, try new experiences, find out you might have a skill that you're really good at. Find out that you thought you had a skill that you aren't very good at. So you might want to find something else. Build your network, make friends, travel. So really think about the experience. Like, what do you want to get out of college beyond just a degree? If you're really involved in community service in high school, maybe you should look at a university or a college that is involved in their community, like heavily involved in their community. If you really enjoy debate, like you were in debate team in high school and you want to continue that while you're in college, make sure that the university that you go to has a debate team. If you are really interested in Greek life, especially when it comes to Black and Brown students, if you want to go into culturally, cultural Greekdom, yeah, and that may have come off really weird. But if you want to join a Divine Nine organization, or if you want to join a Hispanic serving organization, like Greek organization, make sure that the university that you go to has those organizations, because if they don't, then your chances of being able to be involved in that at the undergraduate level is very low. Sports, for me, cheerleading was a big thing. So I wanted to go to a school that had cheerleading. If you're very close, like if you're very active in a religious organization, make sure that the university that you go to also has some kind of presence on campus so that you can continue those things. Because beyond experience, those are also comforts that will help you thrive because you feel more comfortable and because you feel like you're a part of the campus community. So big thing is experience. What kind of experience do you want to get out of college? Craft it, take out, if you could pick Legos out of a box and say, well, I want this to come out of college and I want this and I want this and I want this, like build your dream college and then you find that college. You don't try to make a college that you think sounds good on paper fit the experience that you want. You find the university that's going to give you the experience that you are, that you're dreaming to have.
I love that. Thank you so much. So build your wish list and find the college, not the other way around. It's kind of what.
Yeah, it's like Build-A-Bear, but with college.
I love it. We are coming up on about 20 minutes left, and we still have a couple more questions to get to. And I know our Q&A, we're trying to tackle some of these as we go through these, but I want to leave time for audience questions. But thinking about earlier in the keynote, Miss Kiana talked about her family's reaction to her choice in majors. So she ended up going to UC Berkeley and decided to major in African American studies. And when she told her family, they said, well, why are you going to go to UC Berkeley and not be a doctor? So there was this family expectation of what she should do versus what she actually fell in love with and wanted to pursue. To our knowing that on this, listening to us right now, we have both students and parents. What advice would you give to both on how do you balance what the individual need is of that young adult versus what the family may expect or need of that particular student? I see a lot of head nodding. Is there someone who wants to come off mute and take that one first? Nicole, go for it.
I will take that one. So I haven't mentioned this before, but I do come from a family that did not go to college. So I am the first. And so for my parents, also being like the very outspoken young woman that I've always been, always wanted me to go to law school, always wanted me to go directly to college, then from college, law school, become a lawyer, so on and so forth. And so when I chose to not only go do junior college and then San Francisco State and then major in sociology, they were a little bit disappointed. I think my biggest advice for first the young people, for the youth, is just go after your wants. Like, it's your life. Like, your parents, yes, your parents have this vision for you and they are doing it out of love. But ultimately, you're the one that has to live with your decisions. At the end of the day, they live with their decisions, you have to live with yours. And so I chose to do what I wanted to do, because I knew that there was something that I was going to have to live with and wake up to every morning. On the flip side, I encourage parents to give their children space, because you never really know what's going to end up happening. And so, like, in terms of me, yeah, now I'm prepping to go to law school, right? And now I'm doing what my parents wanted me to do, right? They had a clear understanding of their child and like their child's skill set, but I needed to like grow in certain areas, and have a better understanding of what I wanted to do with my law degree before I could even go down that road. So give your child the space to explore who they are, to find out what their wants and needs are. And maybe it might align with what you want, and maybe it won't, but they will be that much happier and ultimately that much more successful and fruitful. Money and access aren't always everything, and not everything that seems like it's going to give automatic money or access does. So I just would say give space to your kids.
Give space to your kids. Does anyone have anything they want to add to that? Just advice for parents. What role could a parent take in helping, even if they haven't been to college themselves, what role can a parent take in helping a student select a college that works for them? And thank you, Nicole, for sharing.
If I can just add, I would say to trust the process. I also worked in an after-school program called College Check, where I worked with parents to help them, step back from their kids and realize you've raised this young person their entire life. You've poured into them, you've supported them, you made sure they got to school on time. You're setting them up to be this adult, and just trust the process. Trust that they are going to make mistakes, they're going to fall down, but that you've given them enough for them to be able to get back up and really go for what they want and what they need. And I know a lot of parents, they think like, oh, my kid needs to be a doctor because that's what's going to help this family or what have you. But trust that your kid knows what they need, and they're going to do what's right. For the most part, sometimes they don't, but they come back around. So just trust that they're going to get there. And if they aren't doing exactly what you envisioned, that's because something happened in their life where this other thing aligns better with what they want to achieve. So just support them through whatever it is. Be there if they fall, be there to encourage them. But just trust that at the end of the day, they're going to get somewhere where it's going to be helpful for them and to your family.
Jessica, coming to you, and then we are going to go to the audience for some questions.
Yeah, I just really want to echo what Brittany and Nicole were saying. I think specifically speaking on behalf of the Latinx families. So my mom, she worked at a middle school, so she knew college equals success. Didn't really know much about the in between, what it took, everything that comes in that. And so I remember my dad was very like, well, what are you going to study? Like, that's not going to make you any money. Like, my dad had this idea that education, what I wanted to do, so I knew I wanted to go into education. He just assumed that there wasn't money in education and somehow I wouldn't be happy. So I think I always found myself kind of like trying so hard to like prove him wrong in a respectfully in a way where like my dad now has seen like the great things and how happy I am working in this field. And I think for a lot of Latinos, like my mom like would always, even with her encouraging me to go to college, she would say, you should be a doctor, you should be a lawyer, you should be this, there's so many things that you can do. Like, why would you want to be in education? Like, I work at a school. Mija, you don't want to be in that, like teachers don't get paid well, like there was always some kind of like comment or some some negative perspective that I just didn't want to feed into. And so for students, I will say this, and I have my little sister's actually at UC Davis right now, and she's going through that phase where she came in as an environmental science major. She took some science classes and was like, oh no, like this is just, high school didn't, be in all transparency, her high school did not prepare her for the rigorous STEM classes. And I think she's now starting to accept that, she can do it, but it's going to require so much more effort on her end, so much more her being her greatest advocate to kind of push through that if she wants that. But it's also about take classes that just speak to you. I think for me, when I came in as a sociology major, I was learning about race and ethnicity, class, gender, the environment, the economy, culture, knowledge, all these things that for one, my high school never taught me about. I never had these conversations with any kind of teacher, professional. I had them, very subtle with my college access programs, but never to the full depthness that my school, provided me that with. And even at that, there's still, flaws and stuff like that. That's a different conversation. But I felt like the classes that I was taking was very aligned with my identity, my purpose in life. And that's what kind of helped me discover what is my purpose? What do I want to do? What kind of field do I want to go into where maybe there was something that I didn't have that I can give someone else, or maybe there was something that I did have that I can give to someone else. And my mom's kind of started backing off a little bit and kind of just seeing that things were kind of falling into place for me. And okay, she wants to go into education. She'll eventually find something that she's really passionate about and work her way up. And I think it wasn't until my mom kind of understood that it's not a linear process. It's something that kind of comes like this. And sometimes you meet someone, and the emphasis on networking was huge. I had to really emphasize that for my mom. It's not what you study. Your major does not define your career. And I had to be so clear about that. Yes, I studied sociology. Yes, I minored in education, but I work in college access and in higher education now to an extent. And this is kind of the route that I want to go into. And so, it all worked out. I studied what spoke to me, what I wanted to learn more about. And I encourage students to do that. Yes, you might come across some classes that are a little hard and stuff like that. But if it's not speaking to you, if you're not naturally drawn to be oh, I'm excited to learn what's going on in this class, that might be a sign that, maybe there's probably a different class, a different course, a different teacher. Utilize Rate My Professor. You should be using that website to kind of see what people are saying about your professor, because every professor has a very different teaching style. Some of them are, very open, outgoing, and then some of them are very old school and no PowerPoints, don't even share notes. And you're just what? You don't really know how to take that information in. And so doing your research as to what kind of professors are at the school that you want to go to, because the prestigious image of the school doesn't always equate a great experience. And I think that's something that a lot of families should know. Yes, UC Berkeley is a great school, but you might have a better experience at a community college and then transferring, because you might meet your lifelong mentors and things of that sort. And so just being open to that it's not a linear path. Things might change. You might change your interest. It's okay to change your majors. And as for parents, let your students kind of do that. Let them figure that out, because how Nicole was saying, that's how you grow into being this very fruitful, individual with different experiences, different perspectives. And you're kind of building your critical thinking skills as you're doing that. Because otherwise, you won't, you might not understand how certain things work. And, I encourage students who want to pursue STEM, take, social sciences as well. Maybe do STEM and minor in something in the social sciences, so that you have, those backgrounds. And when you're applying to, jobs and careers of that sort, you're coming in with more than just the academics. You're coming in with more knowledge that can apply to maybe the people that you're working with or the communities that you're serving. So just being mindful about those things for sure.
Hey, that's great. Last question, Nicole, I'm going to come to you. The question, and you guys are actually answering this question as you're speaking, but there's a couple questions in the chat around like how, and panelists, if you can see some of the questions in the chat, like I know there's a question about trio. If I'm a junior, can I be in trio? Feel free to type in an answer if you can. But how, I think families want to know, they're hearing you. How do I support my student? What can I do if they are undecided? What do I do? And I'm hearing patience and grace. I'm hearing talk to them about community college. Let's get rid of that stigma right now. It is a viable path for a lot of students. We're going to say that again. It is a viable path for a lot of students. So let's talk about that. Nicole, I'm coming to you. Also, if you have anything to add to that, please do.
Just to quickly add to what Crystal, I believe, was saying, it also adds to your value as like somebody who's applying to a job when you do add, like, you know, if you're a STEM person that goes and does like a minor in sociology or women's studies, it actually adds to your value when it comes to like applying for jobs or to an employer. These are actually things that employers look at nowadays. Anybody can go to college, right, and get a 4-year degree at a university for the most part. Like it doesn't hold the same value set as it once did. But when you allow your child to sort of like explore and have these like minors and double majors and maybe have like a minor in dancing. Sorry, I'm so sorry about that.
No worries.
A minor in dancing and things of that nature. It lets the employer see like, okay, like you're not just pushing out work, you're not just like streamlined, like you have like this other skill set or creativity or things of that nature that could possibly be useful to this job. And as for, you know, furthering on into supporting students, just push them to try anything. If they're undeclared, okay, tell them to take a dance class, tell them to take a pottery class, tell them to do a debate class. Just go through, you can sit down and go through the catalog with your child and just ask them what it is that they like. Look, when you look at the classes, they have class descriptions, and have that conversation with them. Look at the class description and see if your child would be interested in something like that, and let them go for that. It may not be the most like, you know, high end, but it'll give your child the experience that they need to kind of like grow.
I appreciate that so much. I see you all in the chat answering some of these questions. Any final thoughts? We have about a couple minutes before I get to announce the raffle winner. Get ready for that $25 gift card raffle winner. But any final thoughts you want to leave with our students and families who are listening to this panel?
I would just say that there's been a lot of like themes that I'm noticing of like not being sure what path to take and switching and changing. If there's one thing that pursuing higher education taught me is that there's always going to be jobs no matter what. And it's never too late to go back to school. So if you do go to school and you study something and you realize later on when you start working, like, I don't really like that, there's always going to be an opportunity to go back to school and there's always going to be jobs. So just take it one step at a time, trust your gut, and also trust your student. I think that's the biggest thing that it taught me was like establishing boundaries and trust with my parents in order to let me find my path and be successful.
Thank you so much, Chris.